Hello again, and thanks for joining me once more. We're here today, and thanks for joining me once more. We're here today to talk about entrepreneurship and specifically working from the Bamford and Brewerton 2019 text. This short clip is going to cover Chapter 2. So let's check it out. Chapter 2 is all about individual leadership and entrepreneurial startups, and I'm going to share the screen and we're going to get going. Here we go. All right. Okay. Individual leadership and entrepreneurial startups from Bamford and Brewerton 2019. In this chapter, we're learning how entrepreneurial founders impact the business world as a whole. We discuss the importance of an entrepreneurial orientation. We list the triggers that encourage new business formations. We compare and contrast the various types of new business supports. And we explain how you can evaluate those things that you enjoy the most and discover how you can monetize that and turn it into a business opportunity. So this chapter first discusses why individuals are so important to the success of any new business. And part of that process towards achieving success is a self-evaluation process where we consider our individual risk tolerances, our boundaries, and our personalities. We look at the triggers for starting a business and the supports that are needed in the process, including family, community and business networks, and of course, money. The chapter ends with a token of final advice about forming a business, doing what you like, following your passion, following your bliss. So let's get going. What's the difference between large organization and entrepreneurial businesses? Well, large organizations involve many individuals, but no one person is crucial to the survival of the business, not even the person at the top. Knowledge is dispersed widely throughout the organization, and there's hidden excess resources or organizational slack where resources are not being utilized to maximum capacity. Now, in contrast to a large organization, in an entrepreneurial business, this business is very dependent on the people involved, not just the founders or the leaders or the executives, the managers, but also the people involved on the ground floor. So essentially there's a concentration of knowledge, and typically there is limited slack resources because everything and everyone is put to work at the maximum operational level. So they want to max out resource utilization because they can't afford to do it any other way. Now, a special type of business that might exist between the range of large organization and a small startup is, of course, a family business. And their family business is a special kind of business. I've given you a link to a very interesting podcast about family businesses here from this green logo icon there. Check that out. Now, let's talk about collaboration. Now, understanding and collaborating in small groups can be an essential part of new business success. So in other words, we want to put our brilliant minds together. So who are we going to work with? We have to look for people that we are willing and able to work with. So what characteristics do you look for in a business partner? Think about it. I'm asking you to think about it. What is it? Who is the person ideally that you would want to work for? And is that person available in your network? If not, let's go out and find it. Now, the advantages of operating a startup business is that it's owned and run by the same people. Unlike a large organization, there is a great range of flexibility and agility inherent in a small startup. They have the, they as in a small startup, has the ability to fill market niches that might not even be considered viable by a large organization and therefore overlooked, leaving the market opportunity open for a startup. And there is a distinct effort to maximize the value of the business in a startup. Now let's consider agency theory. Agency theory is the belief that individuals act to maximize their own benefit. In a large organization, the manager acts to maximize his or her own benefit, not necessarily that of the shareholders, because that is what will give the manager the most leverage. Now, switch from the large organization into the startup, and the individual who owns the business or has founded the business will act to maximize the value of the business. So in this way, the interests of the owner and the interests of the business are aligned. But that's not necessarily the case in the large organization. All right, here's a consideration of the cost of luxuries. Let's consider a first-class air ticket. And yes, we all know that that costs a lot of money and that few startups can afford. How would you, as an entrepreneur, decide what constitutes a luxury and what constitutes a necessity? So some people might demand a first-class ticket for travel, especially if they're traveling internationally and then have to land and go straight into a very demanding and high-pressured meeting. So they might demand as a necessity the first-class ticket. But if you're the founding entrepreneur on this startup and you don't want to spend the 10 grand it's going to cost for a first-class ticket, then maybe you'll figure that, yeah, economy seat will do you just fine, and you'll be able to do without the luxury and still go into that high-pressure demanding meeting and come out with a positive outcome. All right, so the point is that for some, the cost of luxuries are a necessity, and for others, that's not the case. All right, let's consider your entrepreneurial orientation. Let's consider your risk tolerance. Are you a risk taker or are you risk averse? What's your prior experience? Do you have experience with taking steps into the unknown? Do you have creative experience? Now, these 4 links here give you, take you to sites that will enable you to complete various measures of your personality. To me, the best one of these 4 is Truity, because Truity not only gives you the Myers-Briggs typology, it gives you the DISC typology as well. The DISC typology is used for many recruitment purposes, but I like the Myers-Briggs typology because that gives you 4 dimensions. And there's other options available to you on the Truity link, as well as these 3 previous links. I'm giving you these links because it's important for you to get to know yourself, get to know the people that you're working with, and get to know what careers are the ideal for you and who are the ideal people for you to work with. You've got to get to know all of these things to make good informed decisions on career paths, business paths, collaboration potentials. So in terms of risk tolerance, entrepreneurs must evaluate whether they have the risk tolerance to start a new business, and what level of risk will they accept in any given business situation. Many startups take time to reach the break-even point, and so they may well be in the red leading up to that time. And now, it's especially if it's an online business, you may well spend multiple years before you reach that break-even point. And the break-even point is when revenue sufficiently covers expenses. So you're going deeper and deeper into debt prior to the time of arriving at the break-even point. So at the outset, you, the astute and informed entrepreneur, you need to do enough forecasting and enough analysis to know when will you reach that break-even point. How far along the horizon is that point? How long do you have to hold out to get to the point where revenue sufficiently covers expenses? And are you willing to take that risk? Maybe your analysis is not quite accurate, not as precise as what you'd like it to be. And the point at which you forecast that you would reach break-even point turns out to be further along than what you had identified. So how tolerant are you in that regard? You know, how long can you cope with continued loss? Is there a higher risk option that will take you to that break-even point quicker than other governance structures, other product offers, market offers? All right, so Evel Knievel has become a cultural reference point for risk-taking. Check him out on his Harley there, and check out the costume, right? So an interesting point about Evel Knievel was the very vocal stand against the risks associated with taking drugs. And the dichotomy illustrates that risk levels can vary even within the same person. So essentially, the point is that it's ridiculous that he's willing to take the risk to make these magnificent jumps and survive, take the risk of whether or not he's going to live or die. But then his risk-taking decision-making with regards to drugs is absolutely not worth the risk. Okay, let's talk about prior experiences. What's your history? What's your culture? What's your family values? All of these things contribute to our experiences. They help individuals interpret the world. They put boundaries on what a decision maker will consider as appropriate or inappropriate. They establish what people consider to be both possible and practical. So we refer to something called an individual's bounded rationality. So where is your bounded rationality? What do you consider possible or impossible? What is your decision-making parameters with regards to what is a practical approach or not? So individuals' decision-making is essentially bounded by their own version of rationality. And sometimes we make decisions that are not rational, but we spend a lot of time rationalizing to ourselves, maybe even years, to justify that that was a good decision, right? When clearly it may not have been. All right. So, about your own personality, we can analyze our personality through completing established and validated personality tests. I mentioned the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs gives you 4 personality dimensions, whether or not you're extrovert or introvert, whether or not you're sensing or intuiting, whether or not you think or feel predominantly when you're making decisions, and whether you have a judgmental or a perceptive type of orientation. So these 4 dimensions, once you identify these 4 dimensions, you will better recognize which careers are more appropriate for you than others. Now, Enneagram is another personality test, and this test gives you 9 different types of personalities, again, to help you understand your risk tolerance and your values, for example. And then the Big 5 is a psychology test that looks at what psychologists, pretty much there's a consensus that these are the 5 factors of personality. How open-minded are you? How conscientious are you? How agreeable or not are you? How neurotic are you? And how extroverted or not are you? All right, so whatever personality we bring to the table, some of us have a higher entrepreneurial mindset than others. And so triggers for starting a business might come from disastrous events, or what we may immediately perceive as disruptive events in our lives. Things like losing your job, things like experiencing a midlife crisis, things like hitting the glass ceiling. These are triggers for starting a business, but these are what might be considered negative events. What about positive events? What about a new child arrives in your family? What about the kids grow up and leave home? What about your best friend comes up with this fabulous idea? What about you read a book or attend a seminar and it triggers your thinking? What about we see some sort of trend in the broader community, and we recognize the potential of that trend and what we could possibly do to service or contribute towards that situation? So we can talk about personal motivations, or we can talk about circumstantial motivations. So the personal motivations might be, for example, that we lose our job, or that we extend our family. And these are probably the strongest motivations that there are. But circumstantial motivations, like, for example, changing dynamics in the broader environment, they result in a defensive positioning. They are about taking identifiable opportunities in the marketplace. Now, I mentioned the glass ceiling just before. The glass ceiling is it's kind of like a metaphor for people who are, specifically women, especially women, who are seeking to climb that corporate ladder, and we get to a certain point and we can't get past it. And it's a practical reality that limits the level to which women could climb that corporate hierarchy. Women have been seeking to break that glass ceiling, and one way that women have been able to do so is by starting their own business. When they find themselves blocked on climbing that corporate ladder, it may well be a trigger to go and start their own business. So there are many women-led businesses. Female entrepreneurship is trending. Women-led businesses formed at a rate 50% greater than businesses that are led by men, and it's the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs. Minority women are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs. There is more than 1/3 of all female businesses headed by women of colour. And I've given you a hyperlink there to Project Diane that is a showcase of female entrepreneurship, and specifically minority women owners of businesses. So check that out. Now, there are many supports and resources available to the entrepreneur, and you have to dig sometimes to find the support that you need, but it's up to you as to how informed are you with regards to available supports or not. If you haven't found what you need, keep looking. It's there somewhere. And if it's not, then maybe you've identified a market opportunity. So what do I mean by support? Well, you know, your family, your inner circle, your social networks, your community networks, for sure, can be support mechanisms. And you may well lean on these support mechanisms for emotional support, for example, maybe even for financial support. But within the community, and specifically within the business community, there are government agencies that are specifically designed to support entrepreneurial ventures. So any business will draw on a range of supports and set up their necessarily support system in line with what that organization needs. I mentioned family. Family members are resources for support, for guidance, for success, suggestions, even funding. And the role of family is critical for many ventures. It's so critical that many ventures end up being family businesses. So the long-term management is unique for a family business because of the level of commitment that accompanies family employees. There's potential negative long-term issues, including, you know, if it wasn't a family business, then they would be workplace politics, for example. But in a family business, how does workplace politics translate to family dynamics? That can be very treacherous ground. So presence of the family in the firm can be a positive, but it can maybe be a negative too. What about your network of people around you other than family? So this is a key support in an individual's life and an entrepreneur's life, and it can provide legitimacy to the business and even maybe feedback and advice to you. This is very valuable support. Many resources exist for networking online. In the face of COVID, that's 100% how we are networking in today's climate. And don't disregard networking online. This can be a rich resource of advice on forming a business and growing a business, even potential sources of funding. So how do you do this? Get on discussion lists, join seminars, connect with the people that are on the same seminar as you, start a conversation, connect with them on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Now, like many communities, there are business incubators embedded in the community, and such is the case with Nashville. Two examples in Nashville are the Nashville Business Incubator Center and the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. These incubators offer legitimacy and provide basic office functions such as office space at subsidized rates, you know, give you somewhere to work. But again, in the face of COVID, this is changing. The Small Business Administration, here I've given you a link to the Small Business Administration Resources Guide. This is a government agency that is specifically mandated to give businesses and small businesses the support and advice and guidance that they require. Now let's talk about money. Potential entrepreneurs must fully understand the cost benefit of business. They must account for the financial resources required in running and starting and running a new business. And regardless of the type of business, it's critical to obtain the necessary funding up front. It's and maybe you think you can start and run your business on a shoestring. But is that really the best way to start and run your business? If you're going to start and you run your business on a shoestring, how long is it going to take you to get to break-even point? Should you seek investors, for example? Should you seek government grants, for example? Should you seek support from family and friends? Do you need a partner who can bring the money? Right. Now, what's the best business idea for you? Well, essentially, it's something that you like. Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. And entrepreneurs need to spend considerable time at the business to be successful. So you better like what you're doing. And if we live our passion, then the work is almost effortless. The work might even generate positive and beneficial feelings or experiences for an individual. So take this same point and flip it. You might have a really good business idea, but if you're not passionate about it, then what for? You know, just to make money? I don't know. History and research has shown that's probably not a good idea. So here's a short review of the chapter that we've just covered. The critical points are that the most important aspect of any entrepreneurial venture is the entrepreneur themselves. And entrepreneurs should be aware of their level of risk tolerance, their individual biases, and their bounded rationality. Why? Because a new business is all-consuming and hopefully very rewarding. And so because of that nature of a new business venture, we have to draw on the resources that are available to us, including family, individual and business networks, and the local community, including, for example, government agencies that are specifically designed to support us. Final piece of advice, follow your bliss. And there you go. That's chapter 2. Thank you for your attention, and I shall see you again soon for chapter 3. Hope you like. Bye.